Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about the physics of 6 pictures I took during photojournalism. It was a series of rabbit holes that I thought were pretty interesting. Alright, so here we go. Here's picture 1. I took this whenever I was taking a nightly walk around the campus. I needed to talk about a couple forms of physics with this picture, so I decided to be a little bit creative. The obvious form is the color of the sky, which I will get to, but the creative one I came up with was the warping of roads. If you look really closely at the road, you can see it's a little warped. This happens due to a long period of wear and tear. There is an equation that would allow you to find out the difference between damage in different cars, but I'm a film student, so I don't need to know that. Alright, the physics of the sky. In very simple terms, the sky looks that way because of the angle of the sun. The time spent going through our atmosphere decides what color the sky will be. During the day, the sky is blue because the light has to pass through a minimal amount of our atmosphere. It becomes more red whenever it has to travel through more of it. I'm being very vague, so that might be confusing. If so, I'm sorry. Next picture. Look at this guy. His name's Zuko. He sucks, but he's awesome, and I love him. In photophysics, I had to take this pic with the rule of thirds in mind. I think I did a good job with that. The physics I talked about with Zuko here were Schrodinger's cat and how a cat can turn in air. Schrodinger's cat is a pretty simple idea. It is essentially a more complicated form of the snowball effect. Atoms are weird. There's a point at which they can be deteriorated and not at the same time. It's when they're exposed to radiation, it just makes them a little bit weirder. Schrödinger had a sensor for radiation in a box with poison and a cat. If the sensor picks up the atom's deterioration, then the poison is released and it kills the cat. But like I said, atoms are weird and can exist as both. So if you follow the snowball effect, that means that the poison is both released and not released, and the cat is both dead and alive. Weird stuff. Next, physics. Cats are able to do something basically impossible. They can turn themselves around in air with no momentum. It's a very simple explanation. They turn themselves into a V shape, creating angular momentum. Using this in their very specific muscular structure, they can move in air. Okay, next picture. I took this pic for the men's RMU club volleyball tryouts. I had to keep symmetry in mind when taking the picture, and I think I did a good job with that. At first glance, you would think I would be talking about the physics of volleyball, but I actually talked about the physics of fluorescence and the physics of running. Alright, fluorescent lights are the lights in gyms and stuff, the yellowy colored ones. I'm going to say big words in a sec, so just stick with me, please. Fluorescence happens when a nanostructure descends into a lower state of energy. This usually happens when that energy form hits the ground. We recreate this by trapping noble gases in a tube with a drop of mercury. I think mercury acts as the grounding agent when electricity is added. The electrons are excited and they spin in opposite directions, which makes the light. For the physics of running, I will be more confident in my answer. It isn't that complicated. It chalks up to GRF and angle. GRF is ground reaction force. It's the idea that when moving, someone gives off an equal but opposite force to the ground. You just put more of a force into it whenever it's running, but you also need angle or you'll just move upwards. Pretty simple stuff. Next pick. This is a pick I talked about volleyball. Volleyball has a very special place in my heart. It is a sport I played and currently love. I just talked about the physics of serving the ball. As you can see in the picture, she is serving the ball. She can get the ball over the net by putting her potential energy into the ball, turning it into kinetic energy. After the ball leaves, gravity and aerodynamics work against the ball. This means you got to put a good amount of kinetic energy on the ball to send it over. Gravity moves the ball down while aerodynamics, drag, slows the ball down. You can use drag to your advantage by doing a float serve. This is a serve that has zero spin on the ball, making it move back and forth due to the grooves and drag. Another serve is the jump serve that relies on putting as much spin on the ball as possible. The grooves and drag added to the spin make the ball drop incredibly fast. This is why you just need to hit the ball as hard as possible to make sure it goes over the net. Next picture. This is probably my favorite picture out of the class. I took this in the backyard of my girlfriend's farm. Those are her 2 pups, Duncan and Stony. Duncan is the brown one. They are giant beings. They are like 7 months old and they're the size of full-grown people. Because of this, I decided to talk about the physics of these puppers. Animals are weird. Dogs are super weird. They have these weird compass thingies. In 2020, researchers found that dogs find their home using 2 different methods. The most known method is tracking. This is the scent finding method everyone knows about. They use their sniffers to get a familiar scent and they follow it. The less known method is called scouting. They found that every dog that lost the scent trail would pace on the north and south line until they get an idea of where home is. They do this with a sense of magnetic fields. It's weird stuff. Now that these little guys found their way home, they got a drink. They need water. They're big dudes. I'll try to make this quick. I got to talk about the next picture for a while. Dogs and cats use adhesion to drink water. However, dogs also scoop their tongue. This is usually a bad idea because they don't have cheeks and the water will fall out. They still do it though because they get slightly more water with the scoop and fall method than just the adhesion method. Last picture. Alright, now I have to talk about this picture for the longest amount of time. It isn't the most interesting rabbit hole, but I dug myself a grave and now I have to lie in it. Here is the physics of trees. I'm first going to talk about certain sections of the tree to give context to other parts. The other parts I'll be talking about are the physics of water in trees and the relationship between tree height and leaf size. I know this isn't on the same level as cat, quantum, and probability, but it is what it is, I guess. Trees! Do you know what roots are? You don't? Well, let me break it down for you. Roots are the little dangly bits connected to the trunk of the tree. The difference between roots and branches is that roots are underground and give nutrients to the tree. We'll talk more about this later in sections. The roots grow deep and far into the soil and collect nutrients. These nutrients climb up the tree through the trunks to the leaves to keep them healthy. In turn, the leaves produce sugars. These sugars are taken through the trunk and feed the roots. The trunk acts as the nervous system of the tree, with the bark being the skin, I guess. The leaves create sugars through the process called photosynthesis. I learned about this in 5th grade, so I think I don't need to go over it. In super simple terms, the leaves take sunlight in through chlorophyll and turn it into sugar. Kind of cool stuff. Okay, I'm going to talk about how water travels up through a tree. If you don't know, trees are not people. This means they don't have veins or a pump organ to move things through their body. So how trees work? Trees work with xylem. You may be wondering, what is this? Well, it is the water movement cells a tree has. These little guys move water up the tree, and these little guys replace the evaporated water in leaves. There is xylem tubing going through the entire tree where the water travels up through cohesive forces. When water gets sucked up the tree through cohesion in the tubes, there's a negative water pressure in the roots that causes them to suck up even more water. Thus, the cycle continues. For the last bit of physics I'm going to talk about with trees is their height and leaf size. Previously, I talked about the tree's nutrition cycle, and that basically is how they grow so tall. The cycle never really ends. Well, it ends if a corporation feels like a McDonald's would look better in its spot or due to a fiery gender reveal party. In a world where these trees are perfectly safe, the only thing that would stop its growth is water. If a tree grows too fast, it will suck up all the water in the area. This will make it have incredible short-term growth, but it will end up with the tree dying. Once it gets bigger, it will need a lot of water, but they drank it all, so it'll just dry up and die. A changing climate or a drought can also stop the cycle. In a normal environment with normal weather conditions, a tree will usually scale its growth based on the amount of water that averages that area. As for the leaves, they grow based on how much sunlight they get. The more sunlight they get, the more sugar fluid they make. This travels through the channel of the tree called the phloem. Researchers have found that more movement in the phloem, the larger the leaf. This then means that there is now more space on the leaf to gather more sunlight, creating more movement in the phloem. Through this study, they were able to find out 2 things about the relationship between tree growth and their leaves. 1, trees with bigger leaves are healthier due to how much sugar fluid is flowing through the tree. And 2, it would grow the tree very fast, resulting in a more difficult time moving the sugar fluid in water. As we discussed earlier, this could result in the tree dying if there isn't enough water. In addition, even with big leaves and good water, the tree would eventually slow its growth naturally due to the distance between the crown and the roots. So what did we learn here? Trees are weird, and so are dogs and cats, and basically everything. I take a lot of pictures already, but looking into physics of them is a really interesting experience. I had a great time going down these rabbit holes. Thank you, Professor.